Thank you very much, and hello to everybody. Thank you for coming. It was an excellent meeting. I think the effort by the US president of arriving just a few hours after his spectacular job that he's been doing regarding peace in the world and in the Middle East in particular. So he was, as I said yesterday, very kind. He was very, as he always is, straight to the point. He was pretty much aware of all the different things that we've been discussing with his team. We were able even to resolve all of those issues in that same meeting. He wasn't the one who essentially took the leadership and stressed the most important issues that we had to resolve in terms of what we were dealing for the trade negotiations. So all in all, again, also showing the spectacular support that he's giving to the country, to the, as he says, to the policies that we are following, because he really admires our president. That is obviously mutual. Our president is probably his #1 fan, but above all, he's very impressed on all the economic achievements, and he's willing to support, to continue supporting what we've been doing. And as I said in my last interview, is in a way is like, if we continue this path, if we continue with our policies, we have our own whatever it takes from the most powerful country in the world. So this is an opportunity for all the Argentine people and for all of us that we are not going to waste.
So, Minister, I want to ask you a follow-up before I turn to Josh to ask about swap lines and currency bans. But during the meeting yesterday, President Trump and Secretary Bessent, who presented President Milei's genocide with the Atlantic Council Global Citizen Award a few weeks ago, they both praised, again, President Milei's economic plan, Trump saying that Milei's financial philosophy is correct, and that he's confident of Milei's success. With legislative elections 2 weeks away, the President Trump also said, if he wins, we're staying with him, and if he doesn't win, we're gone. How did markets interpret the meeting writ large, including the various comments and the do-outs from the meeting, and how do you see that kind of playing out in the next few days, in the next few weeks?
I mean, I can give you my interpretation of this. We've been working with the Treasury Secretary, also the Foreign Affairs Minister, and pretty much all of us, we've been working for quite a long time. I think my interpretation is that what the President meant is that he's going to support our policies. So if there is a change in of President, let's say in 2027, I cannot imagine President Trump supporting communism in Argentina. So I think that is what he meant. That is something that we used to talk a lot within our team. That is probably for Argentina to become I wouldn't say a serious country, but a more normal country. We need to avoid that type of political volatility. I mean, you can be more on the right side, more on the center, a little more on the left. What you cannot discuss is which path you are going to follow. I mean, this is the freeway from which the country is going to go. Then we can decide to go a little bit more on the right side, or to the other one can go to the center, this a little bit faster or not. What I think it hurt us as a country is that political volatility, that the options are, okay, we go that way, or the option is they go the other way. So that is what I think people, investors, everybody would love to see, because of course FDI, when they decide an investment in the country, they look at the country for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So if you are deciding on what to do, clearly you will be looking at that. So I think for Argentina, it will be very important that the opposition builds a candidate that it is much more aligned with the type of policies that we are following, that is macroprudent policies, right? Fiscal equilibrium, monetary, all the policies that we've been conducting. I think that is what we still lack, and I think that is what the president meant yesterday.
And I think that also goes to the excitement around Argentina at this moment of having this longer-term vision that'll transcend political cycles. Let me turn to you, Josh.
Well, thanks, Jason, and thanks for all the collaboration between our centers and across the council during this busy week. Minister, Governor, thank you for being here. We know how busy this week is for you, how important this week is for Argentina, and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be with us. I'm going to dive right in. I want to talk currency swaps. I want to talk about the ban. And I want to start with how we got here over the past month, Governor, from your perspective. Talk about what happened inside in terms of defending the peso, when you realized you'd have to engage with the administration for support, and how we came to the arrangement we're at today. And then I'll ask you some questions about the arrangement.
All right, great. So I say that we entered a period around mid-July where we entered a phase that we call election pre-hedging phase. Basically, what we observed in Argentina following, in particular, the 2019 presidential election, is that election represented such a shock to the market that since then, every election, every 2 years, either midterm or presidential election, the market presents a tremendous amount of demand for hedging. And what I mean by tremendous is something that holds no proportion to the size of the financial system in Argentina. And we are going through that period right now again. So this is starting in 2019, you can observe it in 2021, in 2023, and again in 2025. And what that did is it puts to a test all the elements that we had, all the different tools that we had in our monetary program. So we're witnessing exactly that. We've calculated that the demand for hedging over the last 3 months is equivalent to more than 40 percentage points of M2, which is the money in circulation, which is, as I said, is an amount that is out of proportion. And the only one that can provide that type of hedging is the government, because nobody else will sell you an insurance on this type of political risk. This is a very extreme situation. And what we've seen in other situations and what we expect to happen this time around is for this to reverse itself after the event. The event being the October 26th election. We had 2 events. One, we had an event on September 7th, which came to as a surprise to the market, and another event on October 26th. So basically what you're observing in the market in terms of financial tensions is derived from that. What you observe is a reduction in money demand that has to be contained by monetary policy, and you observe this demand for hedging that also has to be contained somehow. Fortunately, what we have in place is an economic program that is based on extremely strong fundamentals. So the fiscal policy is on track. The work we've done in terms of fixing the balance sheet of the central bank is in place. And so once this period is over, we're going to come out of this from a position of strength. And the unwind of this will be very evident as a strong cycle from the economic parameters.
And so when you engaged with Treasury in this $20 billion, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, could you talk how that was negotiated? And the question I have to your point about getting to the midterms is, will this be up and running? We know it's in place, but will it actually be up and running and active, the ESF, before the midterms?
Yeah, so the Treasury has been a strong supporter of the Milei administration since the beginning of the administration. You might recall that Secretary Bessent visited Argentina the first day we lifted capital controls. He didn't wait for a month to see if it was going to play out well or not. He just took the risk. He believed in the program. He analyzed the program. He saw the strength of the program. He said, you know what, I'm going to support this. And he made it very clear in that visit, that was in early April, he made it very clear that they were going to support Argentina as long as the economic policy stayed on track. And if we took care of the fundamentals, they were going to be very explicit about their support. And what we observed in the last couple of months is a situation where that's exactly the way they reacted. We stick to our economic program, we maintain the fundamentals in line, and they observe that the source of the volatility observed is a political shock and not an economic shock. And that's where they said, you know what, given that the type of shock that you're facing is of political origin, we're going to provide the political support from the administration side to make sure that you can withstand this type of shocks. And what they've said is that they're ready and they're prepared to work on many different fronts. One is the type of discussions we had yesterday at the White House. The other one is the swap line that you mentioned. The swap line is basically, as the Secretary stated in one of his messages, is a facility on which we've already reached conceptually an agreement on the framework of the swap. We've been working since then, over the last 2 weeks, basically day in and day out, full dedication to completing the documentation associated to the swap, and hopefully very soon we'll be able to execute the framework agreement that will contain the terms of the swap. The swap is a type of facility that is a signal of support of liquidity provision to countries that may need it. You know that other countries such as Mexico has an outstanding swap with the ESF, the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And the idea here is that that facility has been in place for almost 30 years. So the idea here is to put in place probably a more updated version of a facility like that one.
And active within the next 2 weeks before the midterms?
I would hope so.
Okay. One more question for me on the swap. I have more questions about the currency ban, but I'll turn back to you, Jason. But on the swap itself, $20 billion in the framework. In terms of the peso, is it hard currency? Is it bonds? What does Argentina's side of the swap look like?
Well, I think that at this stage I'm not ready to disclose those type of details because they're still being documented.
Okay, we'll follow up on that.
But what I can tell you is that the Secretary has been explicit about their intention to be available on many different fronts, not only on the FX front, but in many other different fronts.
Thank you. Jason, back to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. I'd like to look ahead to the crucial elections in a couple weeks. And looking at the midterms, there's a lot of expectations around the midterms. And my question is, as we look at that next phase of implementation of the economic agenda, what does that next phase of implementation look like in the scenario of President Milei and his coalition performing well in less than 2 weeks? What does that next phase look like, assuming that? And then what would you also say about those concerned about economic reform continuity in the scenario of underperformance?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jason, because I'll give you my personal view is that these midterm elections are probably getting too much attention. I'm not saying that these are not important elections. I mean, for us, they are, but not necessarily for the reasons that I hear, in the sense that, as Santiago said, we are being suffering political attacks from the opposition. Bear in mind, for those of you who do not know, that our party has very little participation in Congress, 10 and 15% on each camera. So there's clearly a lot of opposition, and over the last few months, they've been essentially passing laws quite easily in order to attack our most important anchor, that is the fiscal anchor, right? So what do we need out of these elections? On one side, we need 1/3 in one chamber in order to be able to block these attacks. That is something that we are going to get no matter if we win by 5 points or if we lose by 7. I mean, that is something that we will be able to do. So we will be able to block these attacks from an opposition that the only thing they want to achieve is just to see the country going down, because that's the only way they can come back. On the other side, we do need a simple majority in both chambers to pass all the reforms that we want to go for. And we are not going to get that regardless if we win the midterm elections by 15 points. So that is something that just mathematically we won't be able to achieve. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we will have to do, I mean, all the political guys, I mean, they will have to do a lot of work to build the necessary coalition among the governors, among the deputies, among the senators, so that we can pass these laws that are so much necessary for our country. So that is going to happen because that's our decision, and that is going to happen whether we win or lose by 5 points. So in reality, I think that there's been too much noise about these elections, but at the end it's not going to alter neither our policies nor what we are going to do, whatever the result is. Of course, if you get a good result, that gives you more negotiating power, but it is not that if we, I mean, the outcome is going to change if we win or if we lose.
Mr. Caputo, can you, just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned the efforts by Congress that the government wants to block, right? Can you share a little bit about some of those efforts that are top of concern that you're, either things have been passed recently, which you've been tracking, but also things you're concerned about moving forward?
Well, I mean, the concern is that they know that we have done what Argentina, what no other president dared to do in the last 120 years, that is achieve fiscal deficit, primary surplus, and bear in mind that over the last 124 years, in 113 years, Argentina had fiscal deficit. And the way we financed those fiscal deficits, it was either by raising taxes, excessive debt, or just by printing money, which generated devaluation and very high inflation. And that is what people in Argentina actually perceive as the problems. But they were never the problem. They were just the consequence as how the country decided to finance the fiscal deficit. But the problem that our country always had was actually the level of expenditures that was always higher than what we were collecting from our taxes. So what ended up happening was that we ended up in a country that had huge taxes, that we reached in 2 times hyperinflation. We defaulted nine times. We have removed 13 zeros from our currency. So all that is in the back of every Argentine. And so what is the opposition? What they've been trying to do over the last few months? They just voted over, I think it was over 40 laws, and in a record time, and all of them, they were pointing to breaking this fiscal anchor that we achieved. For those of you who do not know, in the first month of our administration, we inherited a consolidated deficit of 15 points of GDP, 5 at the Treasury, 10 at the central bank. We achieved fiscal equilibrium by reducing 30% government expenditures in the first month of our mandate. Since there on, for 20 months, we've been having primary surplus and fiscal and financial fiscal equilibrium. So the opposition was essentially trying to tackle that in order for us to start running deficit again. And as you probably know, we do not have still rollover of our debt. So if we do not maintain this very tight fiscal policy, then there's no way to finance this other than by monetary issue that we all in Argentina know how it ends, either with higher inflation and devaluations, and that is what we want to protect our people from.
Yeah. Mr. Caputo, you mentioned removing zeros. I remember living in Argentina decades ago. I'm not going to tell you exactly when, but I remember the frustration with having to consistently be changing prices and removing those zeros. And this is something that there's a general desire to move beyond, right? As you're pointing out. Let me turn back to you, Josh.
Sure. Well, I only have 20 billion questions online about the currency swap, and I will get back to that. But I want to talk about the currency ban itself, because I think so much of this really over the past few months has been about the ban itself. And so what I want to ask about the ban is first the rationale putting it in place. Why was it put in place? I think back in April. And then what would be the conditions under which the ban would move? I know it's already widening month to month, but actually go to a floating situation.
All right. So clearly we wanted to move away from the prior regime, which is a very tight regime in terms of capital controls and FX regulations. So we want, as much as we can, move towards an open market, free market, where prices are the main source of information. Okay, and so since we started in the administration, we've been working on getting rid or lifting different layers of controls as we made progress and as we felt comfortable that the risk-reward was in place to do that. When we got to a point in April, we felt comfortable that we could move away from the crawling peg regime that we had into a floating FX rate. However, you have to remember that in Argentina, the FX has not floated, has not moved freely for many decades, except for short periods in time. So moving directly from such a tight regime to a completely open regime, we thought that the risk-reward was not there. We figured that it was better to move there to get to that goal in stages. And the first stage, we thought, look, we're going to put in place a band system in order to provide this sense of containment. In contrast to most FX band regimes, these bands are very wide. They started out at 40%, and every month, as you said, they move out 2 percentage points, one on the top and one in the bottom. So effectively, in time, the bands become non-binding constraints, and you move naturally to a floating FX regime. So that's the rationale behind the band system, and that's how we put it in place. And we continue to believe that we want to move towards a market that can find its place, can find its price, and it has to do it within certain containment. Because bear in mind that Argentina, the Argentine economy is a bi-monetary economy. It's comparable to economies like Uruguay or Peru in the sense that the dollar is not only a currency in which you can hold your bank deposits, but you can also transact, and it's used as a currency for value. I mean, if you think about real estate, if you think about real assets, many times people think about them in dollar terms, but then at the time of consuming, going to the supermarket, they think about in peso terms. So you have this dual situation where containing FX volatility is very important. It has a very strong impact on economic decisions.
So on the currency band, what I'm hearing is that basically you're in this natural trajectory and nothing about what's happened in the past month or the swap line or anything changes that trajectory in your mind. You just keep widening out?
We're very comfortable with respect to how the bands have been calibrated. We believe that the calibration of the whole economic program holds integral consistency. Mm-hmm. It makes sense and it works well. What we're seeing, what we observed in the last couple of months is, as I said, is a shock that is political in nature. So we don't believe that we should be recalibrating the whole economic program, or for this purpose, the band system, in the context of a temporary shock. We observe it as temporary shock because it's something that started as a strong demand for hedging a couple of months before the election, and after the election, the shock is done. So that's why we've continued to reaffirm that we are not anticipating any change in the fixed regime, and that we're comfortable that this regime is consistent and is well calibrated for these purposes.
And
there's
just,
nothing in your...
if you,
No,
if
please,
you, if you
Minister.
allow me to add something to that, we also believe that for Argentina to be a more competitive country, what we actually need to do is to continue lowering taxes, lowering regulations, and lowering the cost of funding for the different companies. There's been this belief from not just from left-wing economists, but even from right-wing economists, that the only way that Argentina can be a competitive country is just by having a very weak currency. And we all know that having a very weak currency only means weak salaries too, and an economy that is just not doing well. So I think pursuing that type of policies makes really no sense. We feel much more confident, and we strongly believe that the way to become a much more competitive country is, as I said, I mean, to continue doing what we've been doing. And I say that because we have removed already 2.5 percentage points of GDP in taxes. We have removed thousands of regulations. So to us, that is the most important thing. So the next goal, of course, is to be able to, through these labor and tax reforms that that hopefully we will put in place in the short run, to be able to also develop a much more important local capital markets. Argentina is a country that essentially relies too much on international markets because we haven't been able to develop a local capital market. So we need to create the incentives so that we have local savings that, for a country that now has no deficit, that money has no other way to go but to the private sector. And that is what we want. I mean, our goal is to look at to the long run, as our president said, to become the freest country in the next 20 years, the country that grows the most. And in order to do that, we need the private sector to be the one who invest and do this kind of things. So for us, we do not have an issue with FX. I mean, we do have to continue to do this work, and for that we have to implement these reforms.
But also, sorry,
Yeah,
Josh,
no,
because he triggered thoughts in my mind. No, that the idea behind shifting out or moving away from the crawling peg regime was to introduce flexibility to the exchange rate. And since we launched the program, the effects has moved swiftly, very smoothly. It has, in real terms, it has moved up 25%. Mm-hmm. And this has been in a context of inflation coming down month after month, core inflation coming down consistently. And also, when you look at Brazil, one of the most relevant trading partners, the change in the effects between Brazil and Argentina since the beginning of the year has moved around 60%. And this, again, has been in the context of inflation coming down. Yeah. So we're very happy and very comfortable about having met these objectives of adding flexibility while not observing an anchoring of inflation expectations.
So just one more question from me, Jason. On the currency side, I have questions about inflation as well I'll come back to. But just on the swap and the currency ban, are there any terms and conditions associated with it? Certainly not around floating the currency. It sounds like that. So there's nothing in terms of conversation with Treasury or otherwise. It's basically, here's the currency swap, 20 billion, get through the midterms. But there's no other agreements associated with that.
The Treasury will coordinate and rely on the IMF for policy recommendations.
Understood.
They will not engage in those type of things.
Talk about the IMF in a minute. One more just on the China side of it, because there's been speculation. Argentina also has a swap line with PBOC and China. Is there any even implicit expectation that there'd be a reduction of engagement with China when it comes to that swap line?
No, the Treasury Secretary was very explicit yesterday asking that question. And he was very explicit about it, and this holds no relationship with that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I saw that question also came in from Paula Uribe in the audience on conditions related to China, and I think it's important that Secretary Bessent was very clear.
Very
and
clear.
You're clear on that too, President. We were talking earlier about confidence in the Argentine and the economy, right? And confidence, of course, helps to bring in foreign investment. Just the other day, I believe it was last Friday, OpenAI and Sur Energy signed a letter of intent for a $25 billion data center in Argentina. And lots of course, enthusiasm around that letter of intent. How much of an increase in foreign investment are you already seeing in addition to, and you can talk about that particular case as well, and also how much more do you think it's realistic to achieve? What are your goals, your expectations of what of whether it's short term or medium term of what can be achieved?
Well, I would probably say that what we are witnessing with respect to FDI is remarkable. I probably don't think that there might be many experiences around the world at the speed and at the interest, the level of interest that our country, based on the policies that our president is conducting, it is actually phenomenal. Just over the last 2.5 months, I can count for real announcements, not just indications, but actual announcement in the neighborhood of $80 billion. $80 billion for Argentina is, believe me, a number that is quite impressive for our country. But on top of that, we already have approved under this new regime for big investments, for investments in excess of 200 million, already 8 other projects, and we have, correct me, Pablo, if I am wrong, but seven more, 8 more. So we are talking of additional, $20 billion.
So almost $100 billion.
So almost $100 billion of investments that are already underway. Of course, they are not going to come tomorrow. These are investments that will take 2, 3, 4 years. But for us, for a country that is totally undercapitalized, that is a total game changer. So again, what we are trying to achieve here, and that is our goal, is to really have a break in Argentina's history. So what do people want in Argentina? Of course, is higher salaries, higher income. For that, you need more jobs. In order to get more jobs, you need more growth. And in order to get more growth, we need more investment. And this is the first time that we really see a lot of interest. And let me tell you, there are much more interest that we never say until we are not sure that that investment is coming. But we've had many meetings with the President Javier Milei. Even 2 weeks ago, we were here in the US meeting 2 or 3 of the most important businessmen in the US, already promising us that they are going to be investing billions in Argentina. We haven't announced that because it's not being formalized, but the level of interest that we are seeing, and I have to say also for the first time, from US companies. It's all around the world, but really US companies are stepping up, and this support that we are having from the US, I think will also help a lot to US businessmen to engage even more with us. So I expect FDI to really be a game changer for Argentina in the next coming years.
President Trump yesterday mentioned the opportunities with greater two-way trade between the US and Argentina as well.
Yes, too many. Some people think that if we get something because of an investment, then the other country has to lose something. And it is actually not the case. Everything that we are talking about is in the benefit of both countries. So it can be a phenomenal partnership. They see us now as a strategic ally. We, of course, see the US as a huge strategic ally for us. And everything that we are talking about, as I said, leads to a mutual benefit for both countries.
Mr. I want to give you an opportunity. We have obviously our in-person audience here. We have a number of cameras live streaming this conversation as well. And I want to give you an opportunity as I look at the coverage in the American press about what is happening with regard to Argentina. There's different words that are thrown around, right? Bailout's one of the words that is thrown around. I want to give you an opportunity to describe, with all those in the audience, but all those watching online, how you would characterize the U.S. support for Argentina at this time.
Well, as the president said when we met with him, like also 2 weeks ago, I think one American journalist asked him that, and he said this has nothing to do with a bailout. Argentina doesn't need a bailout. I mean, we are doing a partnership that, as I said, will benefit both countries. What they are giving us is short-term financial support because, as Santiago said, they had identified that this has been a political attack, and they know that this can create short-term financial difficulties for us. Just to give you an obvious example, if some of you come from the financial markets, this political attack raised significantly our country risk, and so the possibility of rollover the principal. And the reality is that we've been paying back not just interest, but also principal for the last 20 months. So we've been buying a lot of reserves, actually more than any other country, more than any other government prior to us. In the first 20 months, we bought $29 billion of reserves. Now, we haven't been able to hold most of it because we've been paying back to importers, bondholders, multilaterals. We've been canceling debt on a monthly basis. We have reduced our debt by a little bit more than 50 billion. So the reality is that, as I said, this is working well. As the President of the United States said, this is not a bailout. It's a partnership. It's a strategic partnership that looks for the benefits of the American people and the Argentine people, and we are very confident that we are going to achieve that.
Thank you. Josh.
So I'm going to try to weave together some of the questions we're getting online with my questions. But the first, and this builds off what you were just talking about, Minister, what is the status overall of foreign exchange reserves, separate from currency swap?
Say that again, sorry?
The status overall of foreign exchange reserves right now. Where are things?
I leave it to the central bank.
So, but you touched on this a little, and I'll turn to you, Governor. But what is the situation right now in terms of the reserves, and what's the strategy to strengthen that?
All right, so I'm going to assume that the question is related, because we publish our reserves daily and our balance sheet on a monthly basis. So I'm going to assume that the question is about the trend in reserve accumulation.
Yes.
And I think what many people lose in terms of perspective is what we've been working on in terms of fixing the balance sheet of the central bank since the beginning of the administration. And what do I mean by that? Reserve accumulation is not something that you wake up one day and say, today I'm going to accumulate reserves, because effectively what you have to think about is that when you purchase reserves, you're printing pesos, you're printing local currency. So you need to make sure that in order for the reserve accumulation to be consistent with the rest of the economic program, that those pesos that you're going to be printing can be harbored somewhere effectively. Because if you're going to be generating a disequilibrium on the peso front, just because your objective that morning is to accumulate reserves, the pain might be larger than the benefit. So since the beginning of the administration, what we've been doing is digesting the excessive amount of pesos that were already printed in the system. Bear in mind, you may not know this, Josh, since the 2002 crisis, the Central Bank of Argentina provided unbacked peso financing to the Treasury for a total of 62 points of GDP. During the 4 years of the Alberto Fernandez administration only, those were 18 points of GDP. So that's a sense for the excess amount of pesos floating in the system. We stopped that immediately when we took office, and so since December 2023, what we've been doing is strengthening the peso from that perspective, limiting the amount of peso printing. So, but we needed to digest, in a way, those excessive amounts, right, that were already floating in the economy, and they were represented by, among other things, the interest-bearing liabilities of the central bank. We inherited 4 times interest-bearing liabilities over the monetary base. And today, those are at 0. So it took us through 2 different stages. The first one is digesting the excessive amount of pesos. The second one is, the second element that is important for this, to understand this, is the support for the Treasury in terms of providing them with the dollars, because as the minister said, we purchase more reserves than any other administration. However, because the Treasury doesn't enjoy the rollover of its principal payments through the fiscal surplus and the domestic market, it has been paying down its debt. And that means reserve consumption. But I think that from now on, after 2 years of paying straight or making straight payments into the market, and after 2 years of digesting this excessive amount of pesos, we're probably at a turning point. What do I mean by that? We already have no other room to supply an increase in the demand for pesos than through reserve accumulation. So we have right now a monetary base that is equivalent to 4.5 points of GDP, which is approximately half of what Argentina has historically operated under. It's typically, the monetary base in Argentina has been typically between 8 and 9 points of GDP. So we're at 4.5. But that increase in money demand that should come alongside a normalization of this monetary market or through the remonetization of the economy cannot be supplied. When we print pesos to supply that demand, there's no other source for those peso printing than to purchase reserves.
That makes sense. So the question then, as we think about the trajectory here on the reserves and really transitioning a little to the inflation question. We've talked a lot about the currency ban, we've talked a lot about the currency swap, but where you see the inflation picture right now stabilized, I believe, around 30%, and the trajectory over the next few months in your mind?
So inflation in Argentina is going to be exterminated because there's no monetary balance anymore, because we stopped money printing at the beginning of the administration, and this, of course, operates with a lag. There's an inertia, and there's other components of the markets. As the minister said, the elimination of regulations, providing free market structures in every sector of the economy. All these things contribute towards inflation coming down. So I think that what we're going through right now is this inertia process, and that eventually inflation will continue to come down and become comparable to the inflation of our partner countries in terms of trade.
Timeline for the extermination of inflation?
I don't know, because this is path dependent. Yeah.
That's a good central bank term. One more from me, and this is really, I think, the most popular question online, and which is about whether the 20 billion, the currency swap, is going to be enough, and whether you think there's going to have to be more support. I'm not going to ask you about what Secretary Besant said earlier, that's for Treasury to talk about, but whether you think that 20 billion gets Argentina to where it needs to be, not just through the midterms, but beyond, regardless of the result.
I don't think that the swap line is going to be the only tool that they put in place. So I think that trying to gauge whether it's enough or not is going to be kind of inconsistent with the analysis, because if you have many tools, so using which one and when will depend on the economic conditions and what the objectives are at each point in time. So
what are the other tools? It's intervention in the markets.
So that's one of them. The other one is negotiations that are taking place on the trade front.
Yeah.
And there are other things that we are negotiating, but that we cannot disclose for obvious reasons.
And private sector stepping up as well?
I rather don't
Understood.
don't say. But the going back to what Santiago was saying, the level of capitalization of the central bank now compared to their liabilities is probably, I do not know exactly how far back we have to go for see this level of relationship now between our liabilities and our assets at the central bank. So I would say that this swap clearly helps significantly. We are very well capitalized that, particularly for the type of monetary policy that we are conducting, where we are essentially printing no pesos. And the monetary aggregates are at half. I mean, if you look at any of our monetary aggregates, from monetary base to M2 and M3, they are all at half of the level of the average of the last 17 years. So we are already facing a very low level of monetization. That should help us to deal with this. So I think we are in a unique position, really, because we are going to be one of the 5 countries that enjoys fiscal surplus. We are one of the 2 countries that, according to the IMF, will grow the most over the next 2 years. We have a very tight monetary policy. We have the support from the US, so there's no doubt in my mind that we are, as I said, in a turning point in Argentina's history.
Jason, I'm going to turn back to you in the 5 minutes we have left, but I just wanted to thank the Minister and the Governor for the really transparency and taking the questions. I mean, this is really welcome and deeply appreciated at this important moment in US-Argentina relations. So, Jason, back to you.
Thank you, Josh. Josh, you referenced there's been a lot of questions that have come in about the $20 billion additional facility that Secretary Bessent mentioned earlier. You said that's for Treasury to comment on, but in case there is a comment on the importance or any initial reaction, I'll give you the opportunity to do so. Lots of interest in this as we're coming into this conversation this afternoon.
You mean with the latest tweet?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, as I said, I mean, I rather leave the Treasury Secretary to say those things, but it's a confirmation of what I said in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, a couple of days ago. We are working on many more things. We are always very cautious in our economic team, very hermetic. There is some press here. Of course, they may not like it, but that's the way we are, and we believe that's the best way to do it. We only announce things whenever we are certain that those things are happening. But what the Treasury Secretary tweeted confirms what I just said a couple of days ago. We are working on many more things that are going to come, so you will continue to see very good news coming from our relationship with the U.S.
I can't remember, Minister, when we've seen this much focus, this much dedication to Argentina coming from the United States.
Yes.
We only have a few minutes. I want to ask you a longer-term structural question, which is the structural transformation of the country, right? All the economic plans, the economic modernization, economic reforms. This is all part of a broader message and a broader policy of setting Argentina up for success, right? Absolutely. And the country is increasingly moving from a primary agribusiness exporting economy toward a mixed profile, which minerals and hydrocarbons play just as much of a role. So I'd like to get your thoughts as you look a little bit further out. What is your perspective on the implications that this transformation in the economy will have? And also, how does it transform? We're, of course, here at the Atlantic Council, so how does this transform how the world thinks about Argentina and thinks about the opportunities in Argentina?
Argentina is a country that can provide, as I said, phenomenal opportunities for investment. Some of them are already occurring in particular, quite a few industries, mining, energy, artificial intelligence. Just to put that in numbers, 4 years from now, Argentina was always a country that used to rely a lot on the agricultural sector, particularly at the time of providing dollars for the country. But just to give you an idea, 4 years from now, the surplus of the balance of the mining and energy sector will double what the balance of the agricultural sector provides to Argentina today. That is in the neighborhood of 25 billion. 4 years from now, just on energy and mining, Argentina will have additional surplus of 48 billion. You have to add to that what may happen in the industry of en industria del conocimiento, how you say it?
Knowledge, I mean, human capital.
Okay.
Services.
Thank you all. In open AI. And as we always say with the president, what we need is to give Argentina previsibility. What we need is to give Argentina macro order. Then the private sector is the one who will surprise us with, I mean, if you had asked me, I don't know, 20 years ago, if the industry of knowledge was going to be one of the most important industries in Argentina, I would have probably not guessed that. If you had asked me 2 years ago if OpenAI could have any, I mean, a big implication in Argentina's economy, I would have probably guessed not that. So let's the private sector surprise us. In our case, what we are trying to achieve is just to give the resources and the conditions for the private sector to evolve the most. And I also want to take advantage to add nothing to do with this, but I did want to thank the US, the president, the leadership, of course, of the president, but in particular also to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and his team. I mean, we have spent almost 11 hours a day at the Treasury last year. The level of excellence. Last week, sorry.
Feels like last year.
Last year, yeah, it looks like last year, exactly. We spent like 11 hours a day. The level of professionalism, the level of excellence, and the speed at which they move, I mean, it was really shocking. So I did want to highlight that because I think they are truly professionals. Nothing that people do not know, because these are people that have a history at the private sector that speak for itself. But I thought it was good to recognize that.
Thank you. And I think it was also important to mention at the outset the commitment of Secretary Bessent to come to our Global Citizen Awards a few weeks ago, yes, to be there to physically present President Milei with our award for the work he's been undertaking to on economic reforms in the country. We are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you, Mr. Caputo, President Bausili, for your joining us today. I also want to recognize one of my colleagues in the audience, Ignacio Alve, an Argentine colleague of mine who did a fantastic job putting this event together. Argentina's experience is being closely followed around the world, and we're incredibly grateful for your insights today, especially as part of IMF World Bank Week here at the Atlantic Council and across Washington, where we have dozens and dozens of events. And I think the trajectory of Argentina and the trajectory of prudent macroeconomic policies is one to be looked at. And to all of our audience, but whether you're here or online, stay tuned for more to come this week as part of our continued fall meetings programming. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. Thank you.